Welcome to History Rewind. Let's cover this story that proves even a football match can ignite a war. It was 1969, a year where emotions ran hotter than the tropical sun across Central America. On the football pitch, Honduras and El Salvador were about to face each other in a World Cup qualifier. But this wasn't just about goals, fans, or national pride. What unfolded would become one of the most surreal and tragic examples in history, where sports, politics, and rage all exploded literally. This is the true story of the soccer war. A real military conflict sparked during a football match, but rooted in something far deeper. Like, share, and subscribe if you liked the video, and comment at what time and from where you're watching the video. Let's rewind. At the heart of this conflict was more than just sport. It was about land, people, and survival. In the decades leading up to 1969, El Salvador, a small but densely populated country, faced a growing crisis. With scarce land and booming population, Salvadorans began crossing into neighboring Honduras to find farmland and work. By the 1960s, over 300,000 Salvadorans were living in Honduras, many of them undocumented, clinging to any patch of soil they could till. Honduras, however, was also facing internal pressure. The country's elite landowners, working closely with American fruit companies like United Fruit, began to push for land reforms at the expense of immigrant Salvadorans. Honduran peasants, too, demanded their lands back. In 1962, a land reform law was passed that targeted Salvadoran settlers, threatening mass evictions. Tensions simmered, then boiled. The Salvadoran government, already under authoritarian control, warned Honduras against what it saw as ethnic cleansing. Meanwhile, Hondurans accused El Salvador of demographic aggression, flooding their country with outsiders. And then came the match in June 1969. The two nations were drawn to face each other in a three-game qualifying round for the 1970 FIFA World Cup. It should have been about football, but for the people of both nations, it quickly became war by other means. The first match, held in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, ended with a 1-0 win for the home team. But it wasn't the score that drew attention. Salvadoran players complained of hostile treatment, crowds shouting slurs, blaring horns outside their hotel all night to keep them awake, throwing garbage. Violence broke out in the stands, and tragically, after the match, a Salvadoran teenager reportedly took her own life, unable to bear the loss and humiliation. Her funeral became national news in El Salvador. A week later, the second leg was held in San Salvador. If tensions were high before, now they were volcanic. This time, it was the Honduran team's turn to face the wrath. Their hotel was surrounded by angry mobs. Stones were thrown, flags burned, and Honduran fans were attacked. On the pitch, El Salvador crushed Honduras 3-0. But off the pitch, Honduran citizens in El Salvador were beaten, harassed, and in some cases, killed by the time of the third and final playoff in Mexico City. The game became almost symbolic, a duel between two nations already on the edge. El Salvador won 3-2 after extra time and advanced in the qualifiers. But what followed was no celebration that same day. El Salvador severed diplomatic relations with Honduras less than 3 weeks later. On July 14, 1969, El Salvador launched a full-scale military invasion of Honduras. Bombs were dropped on airports. Ground troops stormed across the border. The world was stunned. A football match had lit the match, but the fire had long been smoldering. The real reasons were structural inequality, land disputes, political manipulation, and mass displacement. The football matches simply gave both governments the excuse to let loose nationalistic rage. For many Salvadorans, it was revenge for the humiliation of being cast out. For many Hondurans, it was about defending their land and sovereignty. The war lasted just 100 hours, earning it the nickname the 100-Hour War. But those 4 days were devastating. Over 6,000 people were killed, many of them civilians. Thousands more were injured or displaced. Salvadoran forces pushed deep into Honduran territory but faced fierce resistance. The Organization of American States stepped in, demanding a ceasefire. Under international pressure, El Salvador agreed to withdraw reluctantly. But even after the ceasefire, the war's wounds didn't close. El Salvador refused to fully pull back its troops for months. A permanent peace agreement wasn't signed. Until 1982, 11 years later. The war also froze relations, disrupted trade, and worsened conditions for Salvadorans living in Honduras. Many were expelled. Many returned to an El Salvador that had no homes or jobs for them. The result? Deepened poverty, anger, and instability in both countries, fuel for future civil wars. And as for the sport that started it all, football has always had the power to unite but also to divide. In this case, it became the trigger for long simmering problems that leaders refused to solve through diplomacy. This was not a war over a goal or a penalty. This was a war over dignity, identity, and injustice. But it was football that gave people a way to express that rage, first in the stands, then in the streets, and finally through the roar of warplanes. Even today, the soccer war stands as one of history's most bizarre and tragic intersections of sports and politics. A cautionary tale of how nationalism, when left unchecked, can hijack even the beautiful game. So next time you see a heated match between rival countries, remember sometimes it's not just about who wins or loses. Sometimes it's about everything that came before the kickoff. Like, share, and subscribe if you liked the video. And comment at what time and from where you're watching the video. Thanks for watching History Rewind. Until next time, stay curious.